The lawyer's voice droned on in my father's study, reading words I knew were lies. I stood frozen by the mahogany desk, watching my father's smirk grow wider with each sentence. The will gave him everything: the company, the properties, the legacy my grandfather built over 40 years. My name appeared exactly once for a trust fund of $50,000. The lawyer wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I noticed it. A manila folder, half hidden under a stack of documents on the side table. The edges were worn and I could see my grandfather's handwriting on the tab. My chest tightened. This wasn't grief anymore. This was betrayal, sharp and cold as a knife between my ribs. My father caught me staring at the folder. His smirk vanished for just a second, replaced by something darker. Then it returned, even wider than before. He knew that I knew. And he didn't care. Your grandfather changed his mind in his final weeks, my father said, pouring himself whiskey from the crystal decanter. His voice was smooth, practiced. He realized the company needed experienced leadership, not a 24-year-old kid. I clenched my fist. That's not true. Grandpa promised me. Promises change, Talon. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Consider it a lesson. Trust is a luxury in business. The lawyer gathered his papers quickly, mumbling something about needing to file documents. He practically ran from the room. My father walked closer and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. If you want to challenge this, go ahead. But you'll find every signature, every witness, perfectly legal. His eyes were ice. Or you can accept your $50,000 and walk away quietly. Your choice. I looked at the hidden folder again. He followed my gaze and smiled. Don't even think about it. Get out of my house. My name is Talon Reed, and until 3 weeks ago I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. My grandfather, Vincent Reed, spent 12 years grooming me to take over Reed Industries, a construction and real estate empire worth $200 million. He brought me to board meetings when I was 12. He taught me to read contracts before I could drive. He sat me down in his office every Saturday morning and explained negotiations, ethics, and the weight of responsibility. Your father doesn't have the character for this, he told me once, his weathered hands folded on the desk. He sees shortcuts where there should be principles. But you, Talon, you understand what it means to build something that lasts. My father was Vincent's only son, but they barely spoke the last 5 years. Now I understood why. My grandfather knew what my father was capable of. He just didn't act fast enough to stop him. I was 12 when Grandpa Vincent first took me to a construction site. The noise was deafening, machines roaring, workers shouting, metal clanging against metal. He put a hard hat on my head and walked me through the foundation being poured for a new office building. Everything starts here, he said, kneeling beside me. If the foundation is weak, nothing above it matters. Same in business, Talon. Character is your foundation. Every Saturday after that, I was in his office. He taught me how to spot dishonest contractors, how to negotiate without destroying relationships, how to treat workers with dignity. On my 16th birthday, he handed me a copy of every major contract Reed Industries ever signed. Study these, he said. Learn what works and what doesn't. Then he looked me dead in the eye and made his promise. One day, son, all of this will be yours. Not because you're family, but because you've earned it. My father, Marcus Reed, was never part of those Saturday lessons. Grandpa tried to include him at first, back when I was younger. But Marcus would show up late, make excuses, or undercut Grandpa's decisions in front of clients. I remembered one particular afternoon when I was 15. Grandpa had been negotiating a deal with the city for a new housing development. The terms were fair, designed to benefit both the company and the community. 2 days later, my father went behind his back and offered the city officials cash payments to speed up permits. When Grandpa found out, their argument shook the walls of our family home. You're teaching him to be weak, Marcus shouted, jabbing a finger toward me. In the real world, you do what it takes to win. Grandpa's voice was quiet but firm. In the real world, Marcus, your reputation is everything. And you're destroying ours. That's when the distance between them started. My father began working separately, making deals Grandpa didn't approve. The jealousy grew with every lesson I received, every time Grandpa praised my work. Marcus saw me as a threat. And threats, I learned, he eliminated. 3 days after the fake will was read, I returned to my grandfather's private office on the 3rd floor of Reed Industries headquarters. The company now belonged to my father, but this small room hadn't been touched yet. Grandpa's reading glasses still sat on the desk. His coffee mug, half full and cold, remained where he left it the morning of his heart attack. I moved slowly through the space, touching the spines of his books, opening drawers I'd never been allowed to explore as a kid. Behind his desk hung a picture of us from my college graduation. My grandfather's arm was around my shoulders, both of us grinning. I lifted the frame from the wall to pack it and something fell. A small brass key, taped to the back of the frame with yellowed Scotch tape. My heart started racing. I looked around the office with new eyes, searching for what the key might open. Then I saw it, a locked drawer in his filing cabinet, one I'd always assumed held boring tax documents. The key turned smoothly. Inside the drawer was a small wooden box, nothing fancy, just plain oak with brass corners. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Voice recordings. At least a dozen mini cassette tapes, each labeled with dates spanning the last 10 years. Beneath them, a thick folder of letters and documents, all marked confidential, for Talon only. I picked up the first tape, labeled March 2019 Marcus meeting with Hoffman. I found Grandpa's old cassette player in his desk and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, younger but unmistakable. He was offering a contractor named Hoffman a kickback deal. Reed Industries would inflate invoices and they'd split the difference. Money stolen directly from company accounts. There were more. So many more. My grandfather had been documenting everything. Illegal contracts, bribed officials, falsified reports. He knew Marcus was corrupt. He knew Marcus would come after me. The last letter in the box was addressed to me, dated 2 weeks before Grandpa died. Talon, if you're reading this, I'm gone and Marcus has made his move. I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner. But I've given you the tools. Use them wisely. At the bottom of the box, sealed in a waterproof envelope, was a document I recognized immediately. A will. Dated 6 months ago, witnessed by Grandpa's longtime attorney Bernard Foster and notarized with an official seal. I read it 3 times to be sure. Everything, the company, the properties, the investments, came to me. Marcus received a single property in Montana and a trust fund of $100,000. The same amount he'd given me, just doubled for appearance. Attached to the will was a typed letter of instruction. Grandpa explained that he'd filed this will with the county clerk's office and given copies to Bernard Foster and the company's board secretary, Patricia Wells. He listed the file numbers, the dates, the witnesses. Everything I needed to prove this was legitimate. The fake will my father had presented was dated 2 weeks before Grandpa's death. This real one was 6 months old, filed properly, legally sound. Marcus had committed fraud. And Grandpa had known he would. I sat in that office for 2 hours, staring at the evidence spread across the desk. Every instinct screamed at me to march downstairs and confront my father, to throw the real will in his smirking face and watch him crumble. But Grandpa's last letter kept echoing in my mind. Don't react with anger, Talon. React with strategy. I carefully photographed every document, uploaded the recordings to a secure cloud account, and put everything back in the box. Then I locked it in my car trunk. When I returned to the building, my father was in his new office, Grandpa's office, redecorating. He'd already replaced the family photos with modern art. Talon. You seem surprised to see me. I thought you'd left town by now. I forced a neutral expression. Just collecting Grandpa's personal things. Wanted to make sure nothing important got thrown out. He relaxed visibly. Good. Take what you want. I'm having everything else cleared out tomorrow. I nodded and turned to leave. Talon. I stopped. No hard feelings, right? Business is business. I looked back at him and lied through my teeth. No hard feelings, Dad. His smile told me everything. He thought he'd won. He thought I'd given up. Perfect. Over the next week, I studied every document in Grandpa's box like I was preparing for the bar exam. The most damaging discovery wasn't just the stolen inheritance. It was the shares. Reed Industries was privately held, with ownership divided into voting shares. Grandpa had owned 60%. The rest was split among board members and key executives. The fake will transferred those 60% shares to Marcus, giving him absolute control. He could fire anyone, sell assets, make decisions without oversight. My name appeared on no shareholder documents anymore. I'd been completely erased from the company my family built. That's when I made my decision. This wouldn't be a quick fight in court. This would be surgical, precise, and absolutely devastating. I wouldn't just expose the forgery. I would dismantle everything Marcus built on top of it, piece by piece, until his entire empire collapsed under the weight of his own corruption. Grandpa taught me patience. He taught me strategy. Now I'd use both to destroy the man who betrayed us. I started with the board members I knew Grandpa trusted. First was Thomas Whitley, the CFO who'd worked with my grandfather for 20 years. I called him on a secure line and asked to meet somewhere private. We chose a coffee shop an hour outside the city. Thomas arrived looking worried, glancing over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. "Talon, I'm glad you reached out," he said quietly, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Things at the company aren't right." I leaned forward. "Tell me everything." He did. Marcus had been making reckless decisions, selling off profitable divisions to pay for his lifestyle, borrowing against company assets, ignoring safety violations on construction sites to save money. "There are lawsuits coming," Thomas said. "Contractors we stiffed, workers we fired illegally, clients who got substandard buildings. Your father papered over everything, but it's all going to explode soon." Then he told me about Patricia Wells, the board secretary. She'd quit 3 weeks ago after Marcus tried to force her to backdate documents. "She knows something, Talon. And she's scared." I used $15,000 from my trust fund to hire Kyle Brennan, a forensic accountant recommended by one of my college professors. Kyle was young, hungry, and brilliant at finding financial crimes. I gave him access to every public filing Reed Industries had made in the past 3 years and explained what I suspected. It took him 2 weeks to build the case. We met in his cramped office, where he'd pinned documents across an entire wall like a detective solving a murder. "Your father is running a house of cards," Kyle said, pointing at a chart showing money flowing between shell companies. "He's been transferring company funds to personal accounts, then using those accounts to pay off personal debts. There's at least 8 million missing." He showed me falsified invoices, manipulated tax returns, and loans taken against company property without board approval. "Any one of these is fraud," Kyle continued. "Altogether? This is criminal." I photographed everything. The evidence was mounting. My father's empire wasn't just built on a forged will. It was built on a decade of theft, lies, and corruption. And it was about to come crashing down. 2 weeks after I'd started gathering evidence, I was in my apartment when my phone rang. It was Thomas Whitley whispering urgently. "Talon, I'm outside your father's office. He's on the phone with someone. You need to hear this." He must have put his phone near the door because suddenly I could hear my father's voice, loud and confident. "The kid was easy to handle," Marcus laughed. "Thought he could inherit everything just because Vincent liked him. But the old man died before he could update anything official, so I took care of it." Pause. "Then, I'm selling the Montana property next week. And the commercial buildings on Franklin Street. Vincent built those for sentimental reasons. I'm turning them into quick cash. Probably clear 20 million. My blood went cold. Those Franklin Street buildings were community housing projects Grandpa had designed specifically to provide affordable homes. Selling them would displace 200 families. "The board?" Marcus continued. "They'll complain, but they can't stop me. I control the votes now." He laughed again. "Sometimes the smart ones finish last." Poor Talon never saw it coming. Thomas ended the call. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, hands shaking with rage. Not loud, I reminded myself. Surgical. The next morning, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "We need to talk, Bernard Foster. My grandfather's lawyer." We met that afternoon in a park, sitting on a bench far from anyone who might overhear. Bernard was in his 70s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. He'd known my grandfather since college. "I knew Marcus would do this," Bernard said quietly. "Vincent came to me 6 months before he died, said he needed to protect you. We prepared the real will together, filed it properly, made sure everything was ironclad." He pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the authentic will, the filing receipts, witness statements, everything needed to prove Marcus had committed fraud. "Why didn't you come forward during the reading?" I asked. Bernard's face hardened. "Marcus threatened me. Said if I interfered, he'd claim I was senile, that I'd falsified documents. He had lawyers ready to destroy my reputation." He looked at me. "But I can't stay silent anymore. Vincent was my best friend. What Marcus did, what he's doing to his legacy, it's wrong. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook his hand. "Thank you, Bernard. But I need you to wait just a little longer. When we move, it has to be perfect." He nodded slowly. "Just tell me when." My next call was to Douglas Kim, the manager of Heritage Bank where Reed Industries held its primary accounts. Douglas had worked with my grandfather for 30 years and had attended my high school graduation. I explained everything, the forged will, the evidence of fraud, the money being stolen from company accounts. "Can you freeze the suspicious transfers?" I asked. Douglas was quiet for a long moment. "Talon, what you're describing is serious. If I freeze accounts without proper cause, the bank could face legal action. I have documentation, I said. Forensic accounting reports, evidence of shell companies, falsified records. I'll send everything to your legal team. Another pause. If what you're saying is true and Marcus is defrauding the company, then yes. We can freeze transactions pending investigation. But you understand this will cause chaos. I thought about those families in the Franklin Street buildings, about the workers being cheated, about my grandfather's legacy being torn apart for cash. Chaos is exactly what we need. 2 days later, Thomas called me with panic in his voice. Talon, something's happening. Transactions are being rejected. Accounts are locked. Marcus is losing his mind. The first domino had fallen. While my father scrambled to understand why his money had stopped flowing, I made my next move. Reed Industries had active contracts with 17 major partners. Construction firms, suppliers, real estate developers. I created anonymous email accounts and sent each partner a carefully curated package. Evidence of contract manipulation. Proof that Marcus had inflated costs and pocketed the difference. Documentation showing projects were being built with substandard materials while partners paid premium prices. I didn't sign the emails. I didn't make accusations. I just presented facts and let them draw their own conclusions. The response was immediate. Within 3 days, 5 partners suspended their contracts pending investigation. 2 more threatened lawsuits. The rest demanded emergency meetings with Reed Industries leadership. My father's secretary was booking crisis meetings back to back. I heard through Thomas that Marcus was screaming at everyone, blaming the bank, blaming the board, blaming unnamed enemies trying to sabotage him. He blamed everyone except the person actually responsible. He still didn't suspect me. I'd played the defeated son so well that he never imagined I was capable of this. Then I disappeared. I stopped answering my father's calls. Deleted my social media accounts. Told the few friends I had that I was taking time away to process my grief. No one knew where I was, though I was actually just living quietly in my apartment, working from my laptop and coordinating my next moves. The disappearance drove Marcus insane. Thomas reported that my father had asked about me 3 times in 1 week. He'd even called my old college roommates trying to track me down. He thinks you're planning something, Thomas said during one of our secret calls. He keeps saying you've gone too quiet. He wants to know what you're doing. Let him wonder. Let him lose sleep. Let paranoia eat at him the way his betrayal had eaten at me. While he worried, I worked. I compiled every piece of evidence into organized files. 1 for each board member, 1 for the media, 1 for law enforcement. Everything was ready. I was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Marcus thought my silence meant defeat. He was about to learn it meant the opposite. On a Monday morning, 6 weeks after the fake will was read, each board member of Reed Industries received an unmarked envelope at their home address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Vincent Reed trusted you. Now you need to know the truth. A friend, the drives contained everything. The real will, filed and certified. The forged will with evidence of manipulation. Recordings of Marcus admitting to fraud. Financial documents showing the theft of company funds. Testimony from Bernard Foster confirming the timeline. Photos of contracts with falsified signatures. I'd organized it like a legal case, with an index and timeline that made the story impossible to deny. By Tuesday afternoon, Thomas called me. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Thursday morning. Marcus doesn't know yet, but they're going to demand answers. I could hear the tension in his voice. Some of them are furious. Talon. Patricia Wells is coming back to testify. This is really happening. I stared out my apartment window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there in his stolen office, my father still thought he'd won. He had 48 hours left before everything changed. Wednesday evening, I got a call from Marcus Chin. No relation to the band names, just a journalist I'd met at a business conference 2 years ago. Marcus was with the Denver Business Journal and had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. Talon, he said, excitement clear in his voice. I just got a tip about Reed Industries. Financial irregularities, possible fraud. You're Vincent's grandson, right? Can we talk? This was it. The moment the story went public. I met Marcus at a quiet restaurant and told him everything. I gave him copies of the key documents, enough to write a bombshell story, but not so much that it would interfere with the legal case building behind the scenes. He worked fast. By Thursday morning, as the board meeting began, the Denver Business Journal website published the headline, Reed Industries under investigation. Evidence of financial fraud and forged will. The story was detailed and devastating. It included statements from anonymous sources, references to the real will filed with the county, and questions about suspicious financial transfers. Within hours, the story had spread to every major news outlet in Colorado. My phone started buzzing with reporters wanting comments. I ignored them all. The same morning, 3 separate lawsuits were filed against Reed Industries by partners who'd been defrauded. The company's stock value, though private, was plummeting as word spread. And my father had no idea I was behind any of it. The board meeting happened without me present, but Thomas recorded the entire thing and sent it to me afterward. I listened to my father's voice grow increasingly desperate as board members confronted him with the evidence. "This is a conspiracy," Marcus shouted. "Someone's trying to destroy this company." "Someone?" Patricia Wells' voice was ice. "Marcus, I have the original will right here. Filed 6 months before Vincent died. Notarized, witnessed, legally binding. The will you presented was a forgery." "That's impossible. Vincent changed his mind at the end." "Stop lying." Thomas interrupted. "We have recordings of you admitting the fraud. We have forensic accounting showing you stole millions." "It's over, Marcus." There was a long silence on the recording. Then Bernard Foster's voice, calm and authoritative. "As Vincent Reed's attorney and executor of his actual will, I'm formally presenting this document to the board. Talon Reed is the rightful heir to Vincent's shares and property. Marcus Reed obtained control through fraud." Another board member spoke up. "We're obligated to report this to authorities. Marcus, you need to leave this building immediately." My father's response was barely coherent, a mix of threats, denials, and desperate bargaining. But it didn't matter. The vote was unanimous. Marcus Reed was removed as CEO of Reed Industries, effective immediately. Security escorted him from the building within the hour. The next 72 hours were chaos. Federal investigators showed up at Reed Industries on Friday morning, seizing computers and files. The Colorado Attorney General's office opened a criminal investigation into fraud and embezzlement. Marcus's face was on every local news channel by Friday evening. I watched from my apartment as reporters camped outside the headquarters building, interviewing shocked employees and board members. Saturday morning, Marcus called me for the first time in weeks. His voice was unrecognizable, high-pitched, frantic. Nothing like the confident man who'd smirked at me in his study. "Talon, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain everything." I said nothing. "Talon, please. I'm your father. You can't just, they're freezing my accounts, they're taking everything. You have to help me fix this." Still silence. "Say something," he screamed. I hung up. Within days, Marcus lost access to his personal bank accounts as investigators traced the stolen funds. The mansion he'd bought with company money was seized. His luxury cars were impounded. Every asset connected to the fraud was frozen. He moved into a cheap motel, harassed by reporters and avoided by everyone who'd once called him friend. I felt no sympathy. Only the cold satisfaction of watching consequences finally catch up. The emergency board meeting to elect new leadership happened on a Tuesday, exactly 3 months after my grandfather's death. I was invited to attend as the legal heir and majority shareholder. Walking into that boardroom felt surreal. My grandfather's chair sat empty at the head of the table. The same chair where Marcus had sat for months, making decisions that destroyed everything Grandpa built. Thomas Whitley called the meeting to order and presented the motion: remove Marcus Reed permanently and begin the process of selecting new leadership. The vote was unanimous. 10 board members, all voting to expel my father from the company his own father founded. Then Patricia Wells spoke. "I'd like to make an additional motion. Given the instability and legal challenges facing Reed Industries, I recommend we appoint an interim advisory committee to guide operations until investigations conclude." She looked directly at me. "Talon Reed should chair that committee. He's the majority shareholder, he was trained by Vincent, and frankly, he's the only person in this room who Vincent actually trusted to preserve his legacy." Another unanimous vote. I sat there, overwhelmed as people congratulated me and shook my hand. But I couldn't feel victorious yet. The company was damaged, broken by my father's greed. Victory would come later when we'd rebuilt it properly. Over the following months, Reed Industries went through a brutal restructuring. Federal investigators found evidence of fraud stretching back 12 years, far more than even I had uncovered. Marcus faced 17 criminal charges including wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and forgery. His trial was scheduled for the following spring. The company itself was in crisis. We had to settle lawsuits with defrauded partners, compensate employees who'd been cheated, and repair contracts that Marcus had sabotaged. Several divisions had to be sold just to cover debts. The Franklin Street buildings, the ones Marcus had planned to sell for quick cash, were transferred to a non-profit foundation in my grandfather's name. The families living there would never be displaced. Properties Marcus had bought with stolen money were liquidated to repay company accounts. His personal assets were sold at auction. Everything he'd taken was being clawed back dollar by dollar. I watched it all happen from my position on the advisory committee, working 18-hour days to stabilize what was left. By month 6, Reed Industries had shrunk by 40%. But what remained was clean, ethical, and built on the principles Grandpa taught me. The empire Marcus built was gone. But the foundation, the real foundation, was still solid. The legal resolution came 14 months after Grandpa's death. The court officially recognized the real will, transferring all of Vincent's shares and properties to me. I was 25 years old and controlled what was left of a $200 million company that had been gutted by fraud. I could have tried to rebuild Reed Industries to its former size. The board expected it. Our remaining partners hoped for it. But standing in my grandfather's old office, now my office, I realized something important. I didn't want to rebuild Marcus's empire. I wanted to build my own. I resigned as chair of the advisory committee and appointed Thomas Whitley as CEO. I kept my shares but stepped back from daily operations. Then I took the personal inheritance Grandpa left me, properties, investments, and cash, and started something new. Reed Development Partners. A company focused on ethical construction, affordable housing, and community development. Everything Grandpa believed in. Everything Marcus had destroyed. We started small. 3 employees, 2 projects, 1 office. But we built it right. Fair contracts, quality materials, honest relationships. Within a year we had 12 active projects. Within 2 we'd earned back the reputation Marcus had destroyed. I named the first building we completed Vincent Reed Community Center. Grandpa would have loved that. 3 years after the forged will was read, I received a message from the Federal Corrections Facility in Florence, Colorado. Marcus wanted to see me. He'd been sentenced to 15 years for fraud and embezzlement. I almost deleted the request. But something made me accept. I drove to the facility on a cold Saturday morning. The visiting room was gray and depressing, smelling of industrial cleaner and hopelessness. Marcus looked terrible. Thinner, older, the smugness completely gone from his face. He sat across from me, hands folded on the metal table. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I said nothing. I wanted to apologize. For everything. The will, the company, the way I treated you and your grandfather. His voice cracked. I was jealous, Talon. Vincent loved you more than he ever loved me. And I couldn't stand it. Still I stayed silent. "I'm asking you to forgive me," Marcus said, tears forming. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm your father. I'm begging you." I looked at the broken man across from me. The man who'd taught me what betrayal looked like. The man who'd stolen my inheritance and mocked me for being trustworthy. I stood up. "Grandpa taught me loyalty," I said quietly. "You taught me consequences." I walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the empty room. Behind me, I heard my father calling my name, his voice desperate and pleading. I didn't look back. The sliding door closed behind me, cutting off his voice. I walked into the sunlight and drove back to the city, to the company I'd built, to the life I'd created from the ruins of his empire. He taught me an important lesson, just not the one he intended. Some foundations can't be rebuilt. Sometimes you have to start from scratch and build something better. And I had.